Welcome to What is Going Om for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Times flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Why do people meditate? According to author, speaker, and humanitarian Andrew Holocek, the primary reason is because it reduces anxiety, improves sleep, declutters the mind, and generally helps people feel better. But, Andrew asks, where does your meditation go when things go bad? Where is your spirituality when rock meets bone, as they say in Tibet, or when the crap hits the fan? Andrew Holocek has studied sleep yoga, bardo yoga, and other traditional practices with living masters in India and Nepal, and he offers seminars internationally on meditation, lucid dreaming, and the art of dying. His work has appeared in numerous periodicals, and his acclaimed books include Dreams of Light, the profound daytime practice of lucid dreaming, Dream Yoga, the Tibetan path of awakening through lucid dreaming, and Reverse Meditation, how to use your pain and most difficult emotions as the doorway to inner freedom, in which he advocates that when things get hard, it's time to turn your practice on its head and put your meditation into reverse. What does that mean? And how can it help you step up for your evolution? Stay tuned. Andrew, welcome.
Sandie, it's such a delight to be with you. Really, so much appreciate this.
First thing I must ask, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, Andrew Holocek. Perfect. Well said.
Good. Okay. Always like to get that right. Yeah. So turn your practice on its head. I can imagine that the first response you get to those words of advice is often complete confusion. So how can reversing our meditations help us?
Yeah, well, oh my gosh, in so many ways. You know, I mean, meditation, first of all, meditation is a kind of a catch-all term, right? Multivalent term. It's a little bit like sports. So when these days when people talk about meditation, they say it's like sports. Well, I mean, there's like hundreds of sports. People usually think of meditation, perhaps unknowingly, as fundamentally mindfulness, which is fantastic. Mindfulness is an incredibly powerful practice. But one of the things that I'm working on these days, Sandie, is that as wonderful as mindfulness is, and it truly is, the legitimacy of the mindfulness revolution is amazing. It's powerful. Mindfulness sedates. It doesn't liberate. And so there's so much more beyond mindfulness. So practices that transcend but include mindfulness. And the reverse meditations are in that family. And boy, can we run with that. It's an amazing little known practice, set of practices, which I'm hoping to make more well known, where what we do is we reverse our relationship, we reverse our attitudes, especially to unwanted experiences. Because usually when people think about meditation, they think about getting Zen or chilling out. And when the world's on fire, chilling out's a good thing. But like you mentioned in the opening comments, where do you go when the crap does hit the fan? My experiences with standard practices like mindfulness, they're fantastic, but meditation tends to go out the window when things get really intense. And so these practices are designed, especially in this age when there's so much divisiveness and contention. And I just look at the world, right? I was really inspired to bring these practices out of the slightly esoteric closet of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. My publishers agreed, saying, wow, this could be of some benefit to the world now. And I can get into the weeds. I can get into the specificities, like why is it called reverse? What do you do? How do you get into them? Because, well, boy, once you get into them, I can tell you from decades of doing these practices, they're a game changer.
Meditation is very challenging for an awful lot of people. I'm one of them. And, the monkey mind, etc. But I think if I understand this correctly, you are asking me and many others, when the crap hits the fan, we have to stick with it.
Yeah.
And that is just awful. Right. I mean, that's like, sitting on a pin.
Right. That's reverse, right? Yeah, it's like, you want me to do what?
What? Yes.
All right, really? You want me to do what? Yeah, so that's one reason they're called reverse, because it's like, oh, wait a second. I thought meditation was like, hanging out and reciting my mantra on top of a mountain with the wind blowing. Hey, that's fine. I'm not dissing that at all. But what happens when it gets rainy and stormy and the hail's coming down and you're getting spanked with things? And so that's where the stuff really comes into play. That's where it really kicks into gear. And as I playfully say, but it's so true, by putting your meditation into reverse, you can really accelerate going forward. Because usually when we enter unwanted, untoward, difficult experience, and by the way, I'm speaking not only as a meditator for over 50 years now, but as a clinician. I'm a retired dental surgeon. And so I have spent decades literally in the pain business, writing tens of thousands of prescriptions and having people come in with really raging acute level 10 pain. I've also been involved in studies in neuroscience labs, in MRIs for entire weekends because of my seeming proficiency in meditation. They're studying my brain and how I relate to pain and that sort of thing. So I want to state at the outset, I'm not just simply talking about the stuff from meditative or philosophical armchairing. I'm talking about what it's like in the trenches, in the weeds, both from a scientific perspective and also a medical perspective. And this is where I have some confidence with what I'm talking about, because I've experienced it personally on my own side. I've experienced it clinically. I have some experience scientifically. And then because I teach this stuff, especially over the last couple of years when I was writing this book, I've been working with people going through these practices. And once you get past this little learning curve with it, that's the really amazing things about this particular set of practices. I think maybe because of the intensity of them, they tend to incorporate more quickly than others. And therefore, it doesn't take a lot of practice before you can start to perform. But again, there's so many different directions I can take you with this because it's such a rich topic.
Well, I would like to know about these practices, but before we do that, I want to talk about pain.
Okay.
Because we've all suffered pain.
Oh, yeah.
And, some people suffer more than others. And you say that when you get pain or you get stuff coming up, you actually feel better. And you quote an incident of yours in the book, Reverse Meditation, where you were on the floor in agony one night. And instead of going to the ER, you stayed with it and you went through the pain to bliss. How do you convince someone, stick with it, keep suffering?
Right.
And how do you do that?
Yeah, this guy's a nutcase, right? Well, this is why, in terms of actually teaching this stuff, Sandie, there is definitely some preparatory work, because otherwise, exactly like you're saying, people are going to listen to this and they're going, you want me to do what? Are you kidding me? So in order to actually get into these practices, that's why they're considered somewhat advanced for all the reasons that you're saying. It's like, this is like the opposite of what I want to do. And so I don't want to be facile and presumptuous about what's involved to actually gain some level of confidence or proficiency here, because it's a little bit like studying calculus. If you don't have a little bit of background in arithmetic and algebra, the calculus is meaningless. So in order to really do this properly, the right view is in order, which is creating, and I do this with some rigor, I believe, in my book, and also when I do my presentations, some rigor about the overarching view. Literally, it's called right view in Buddhism, where you establish this wonderful, legitimate view of sacred outlook, sacred world. That again, that in itself is a reverse view. It's a review that all the wisdom traditions radically proclaim, that the world is not made of lifeless matter. The world is made of heart, mind, spirit. It's divine, it's pure, it's basically good. So right off the bat, the right view itself is a reverse view. And so what I do in order to substantiate, it's like, what's the maxim? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So I draw on all the wisdom traditions. I draw on the Kabbalistic tradition from Judaism. I draw on Christian mysticism. I draw on Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and all these vectors from all these amazing traditions that radically proclaim, yes, the nature of whatever arises is, in Dzogchen, probably most archetypally represented, perfectly pure. And so that in itself is two things. It's preparatory practice for the reverse meditations, and it's also the fruition. In other words, the more you do it, strengthened by this view, and the more you start to realize, wow, if I go directly into what I would normally flee from, there's something here. There's some purity here. So that's super important to understand. There has to be a right outlook, a right view, because otherwise, again, you're just not going to do it. Like, this is nuts. And so then what happens is there's 2 preparatory practices prior to actually entering the reverse meditations formally. First one is, in fact, mindfulness, establishing a platform, establishing the ground of quiescence. Because the first thing that happens, of course, when we hurt is we want out. We're just going to FedEx away from this pain. And so the first thing we need to do is to develop some level of stasis, stability, quiescence, where we can at least hold our seat. And then the second practice that's also critically important, and this is such a beautiful, powerful practice, the practice of open awareness, which is the ability for the mind and heart to open, to expand. The narrative is it transcends but includes mindfulness. So it uses mindfulness as a platform. And with open awareness, you're opening your heart and mind in a kind of incubator formal meditation practice session as a way to establish a more kind of radical acceptance to whatever arises in your experience. And then with some proficiency, you don't have to master it, but as the mind and heart opens and you have a greater ability to say yes to what's arising, then what happens then with the reverse meditations, then we voluntarily titrate. In other words, you can do it, you can manage the degree, like you bite your lip or you dig your fingernail into your thumb. And then you start to go through the 4 stages. And we can go through all 4 of these. These are beautiful. And then I could also go back and say a little bit more how I applied this not only some 20 years ago when I had my kidney stone experience lying on the floor, but Sandie, I was in the ER. Just 2 days ago, I was in emergency surgery because of acute sepsis, about to go into septic shock because of another kidney stone, severe raging pain. I mean, it was bad. And I can tell you how I managed it because I've been doing this for so long. I wasn't freaked out once the entire time. The doctors are going in there and they go, "Do you realize how sick you are?" And I'm a doc. I'm not an idiot. At least I don't think I am. But all the while I was so trained in these practices that I was practicing what I preached. I went directly into all the sensations. I was having these violent convulsions. They're called rigors. I was literally shaking uncontrollably. I mean, it was intense. But not for one instant was I like, "Oh man, this is really bad." It was like, "Oh wow, this is really interesting." So I can come back and talk to you about that because again, this is not just rhetoric. I'm not just talking about, "Oh, this is a nice little philosophy thing." No, I'm talking about practices that are street level, gritty, in your face, everyday applications to physical. And then I would say even more importantly, Sandie, really intense emotional situations. And so I'll pause for a second because we can take this into the 4 stages of the reverse meditation itself. But there's a classic adage in the tantric tradition. And these practices actually fit within the rubric of tantra. And you could say in the West, alchemy, where the practice in both those traditions is to transform lead into gold, in this case, pain, suffering, or poison into medicine. And so they are tantric in spirit. And one of the things that characterizes tantra, it's a wonderful maxim, is the preliminaries are more important than the main practice. And so that's why there's the on-ramp. You have to do the preparations because otherwise, exactly on first look, when you're reading this or somebody else is hearing about it, they're going like, "This is nuts." Well, maybe at first glance, it's nuts. But if you want to really radically, irrevocably alter and deeply, profoundly your relationship to any unwanted experience, this stuff is not nuts. This stuff has tremendous traction applicability to whatever happens. So I can run with any of these particular directions.
So what we have to do really is, shift our perceptions first and foremost of all of this, and get rid of decades, if not eons, of conditioning.
Yes.
First. Yeah. And you do that beautifully in the book, but of course in, a 1-hour show, we can't give people everything. So just, give us enough to make us want to read the book.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And so the biggest conditioning, and this is important, that I talk about extensively in the book, is the relationship of contraction to pain.
Yeah.
Because contraction is boy, I mean, again, this is what I invite anybody that's listening. Don't take what I'm saying at face value. Check it out. Kick the tires, test it against your experience. But I invite anybody listening here to see if the following is not true. Whenever you have unwanted experience, especially we can say archetypally pain, and we can say arguably that's the most unwanted of all experiences. Take a look at your experience. Every time I feel it, almost like instantaneously, what do? I contract. And I really like this notion of contraction, because not only is it a description of the experience, it's also highly effective. In other words, I can feel my contractions, right? And so hence open awareness helps you work with that from the outset. And so what these practices do is they allow us to, first of all, sensitize ourselves to all the ways we contract. And before I started exploring this, it was like I had no idea. It's like the ancient Hindu story about the turtles, right? Turtles all the way down. Oh my gosh, take a look at your experience, and I can point this out to you. It's contractions all the way down. From really what I call the overt supercontractors, like anger and rage, and the ones where, boy, you can really feel yourself closing down, all the way down to the bottom, super subtle turtle that I call the primordial supercontractor, which is actually, this is so profound, Sandie, all the way down to the very sense of self. Who you think you are is nothing more than a primordial contraction. And then upon that perverse church, or I should say perverse rock, ego builds its church. And so what one does, and this is why I think the book is, in my presentations, hopefully you're a bit skillful, is we start, again, we titrate, we start really, really easy. We start to look at our experience, and I start to invite you, okay, let's look at the omnipresent supercontractors, all the ways that we contract. And so I start like with anger, the ones that we all know we can feel, fear, panic. We all know what that feels like. And so I invite guided contemplations. Okay, let's bring up an instance, bring up a memory, and then feel it. And you'll go, oh boy, I can feel that. I can feel that. And then so that what we do in a tantric way, the maxim of tantra is transforming obstacle into opportunity. Well, here's the obstacle, contraction. And so then when you feel the contraction, I invite the antidote, which is what? Openness, expansion, hence the practice of open awareness. And so this is what I playfully refer to as the combustion cycle of this path. Contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. And for me, when I first really started to pay attention to this, again, through meditation, becoming more sensitive, more open myself, like I alluded to earlier, it was like, oh, Lordy, I have no idea I was so contracted, and how I practice contraction all the way down. And so we start with the gross contractors, we go down to more subtle contractors. One of what I call omnipresent supercontractor, super because it's happening all the time, is distraction.
Yeah.
Every time we're distracted, we're contracting. And I'm a big fan of word origins. And so the etymology, the word origin of distraction really is literally distract means to pull apart, right? And so, well, this gets a little bit interesting. When I'm feeling pain, what do? I want to pull apart. So what I do in an effort to make myself feel better, at least temporarily, is I distract, I pull apart. And so whether that's through what I call distraction therapy, active laziness, watching TV, all the things we do. And again, I have to say right from the outset, my approach to pain, my approach to this whole thing, because of my facility in the medical and scientific community, is completely integral. I'm not saying you put all your eggs in this particular spiritual practice basket. I am not saying that. I'm saying that this practice is a powerful augmentation. And I can give you some extremely, almost like devastatingly powerful examples, how really at the highest levels, it can be a complete replacement. But what I'm saying, you can augment this. Like I was in the ER, I was taking the pain meds, I was doing what I needed to do this weekend. And I was using my practice of reverse meditation to round out all the edges and actually turn this otherwise really nasty experience, just these last 3 days, into a very profound teachable moment. And again, not a kind of dismissive, new agey thing, hugging everything. No, I was aware what was going on. I was hurting like hell, but I was also able to bring it onto my path. And so then with that said, so this is where it gets really interesting. There's this I find quite a helpful little kind of equation here that is central. S equals P times R. Suffering equals pain times resistance. What's the resistance? The contraction. And so I don't take my word for it. Check it out. See for yourself. So you feel the pain, right? Happens like how many times a day? You stub your toe, you get a paper cut. I got one here just this morning. Oh, like a little owie. They happen every day. And so our usual response is to contract. I notice it, especially when I really start to contract, what happens is that transforms simple pain into complex suffering. Pain is inevitable. You're never going to get rid of your pain, but you can radically alter it. You can 100% get rid of your suffering, because suffering is an inappropriate relationship to pain. You can totally control that. That's the resistance part. So you feel the pain, right? And then usually what happens, it happens so fast. I mean, lightning fast speeds. And I talk about this in the book. I point out the extraordinary speed of the mind, data from the neurosciences, just how fast the mind is, how quickly we contract. Well, we can de-automatize. We can slow down in meditation. We can feel the contraction. And then because of our training, now obstacle and opportunity. Okay, I feel the contraction. What do? Stop. That's the mindfulness part. Open. That's the open awareness part. Bring some space to it. Okay. I start to relate to it instead of from it. Because relating from it, that's no relationship at all. That's just my capitulation. That's where through the contraction transforms simple pain into complex suffering. So we deconstruct suffering back into pain by being with it. And that's the first step. It's huge. And then it gets even more profound as you go further. You can then even deconstruct the pain itself. And by that, what I mean is, again, if you're really sensitive, this is where the meditative mind comes in. If you don't have a meditative capacity or relationship to the stuff, no way. Because the stampede of our instincts, our impulsive, all the Darwinian approaches to pain, because again, pain in the biological, physiological, medical sense, this is a warning sign. Something is wrong. And we have to honor the legacy that's in our DNA. We can't just like override it. So this is where the integral approach comes in, right? We use that, we understand it. But especially as spiritual practitioners, at a point, the evolutionary drivers like pain, fear especially, they become devolutionary. That which really brought us to these points in evolution have to be set aside. That's really important. That's why there's so few people attaining enlightenment these days. That's why so few people are learning how to manage these devolutionary drivers. You know, the pain, the suffering, everything that brought us up to this evolutionary point, it starts to usurp its usual boundaries. And that's where the problems start. So I'll pause for a second, and I can then go very directly into the 4 stages of the reverse practices so people get a sense of how they can start to work with it. Happy to do that.
I would love you to go into the 4 stages. And I don't know if this question is appropriate now or after you've done that. You can tell me.
Okay.
But one of the things that I'm interested in is you actually reached a state of bliss. And you say that we can reach enlightenment. How does that come from this experience?
Well, you know, let me put a pause on that, because you're right. When we get to the 4th stage, then you'll start to see where this comes. And it's also an augmentation, once again, of this colloquial notion of bliss. When the traditions talk about the great bliss, they're not talking about some endless cosmic orgasm that goes on forever. No, the great bliss means an equanimous bliss. It means the bliss of relating to everything in a radically new way. And so I think when I go through these 4 stages, and maybe I can do that very briefly with a little guided meditation. I can do that as I actually guide people through this to give them a sense of it.
Okay, let me just, we've got about 3 minutes before we have to go to break. Would that be better after the break?
Probably, because to do the guided thing is probably going to take 10 or so minutes. So if you want, I can say a little bit. Well, maybe I shouldn't.
Let me ask you, a question that shouldn't be too difficult, and it does relate to what you've been saying about how few people are, doing this now.
Right.
Talk about the Kali Yuga, or the Dark Age, which you say is currently underway. The dark virus that's infecting us, and this, I think, is what is creating so much anxiety for people that anything else is impossible. So give us a few words about that.
Yes, the Kali Yuga. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good one. So the Kali Yuga, the term comes from the Hindu tradition. But the Buddhists talk about it as Mapo. I mean, it's been predicted by many world wisdom traditions forever. And this is my rendering on it. To me, in my estimation, when I look, the Kali Yuga, there's so many ways to talk about the Dark Age. But to me, one of the things that makes the Dark Age so dark is its insidious onset, its insidious manifestation, and insidious continuous practice. And by this, what I mean is I argue that the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, started with the beginning of artificial light. Because artificial light allowed us for the first time to violate the natural curfew of the night, which invites this interiority. That's where evolution takes place. To summarize Chardin, de Chardin, evolution hasn't stopped. It's only moved indoors at the level of the heart and the mind. And so with all our weapons of mass distraction, right, our phones and our computers and our tablets and all these screens that screen us away from reality, what happens is look at what's happening with TikTok and all these addictive tools. I'm really big into the toxicity of social media and cyber skills and all that kind of stuff. Every time people reach for their phones and it's getting worse and worse and faster, look at the airports. We're all like the proverbial frog in heated water. We're boiling ourselves alive because it's happening so fast, we don't even know it. And so I argue that the Kali Yuga is principally brought about these days by what makes it so dark is its insidious instantiation. Every time we're distracted people don't notice things like global warming, like ecological. I mean, that's why the world is so asleep, because we're so distracted, pulled away from reality. And so that to me is the single, in my estimation, all that we see in the world are epiphenomenal instances of these fundamental moments of distraction. Again, you can reduce these into very healthy ways to these fundamental ingredients of the shallows, everything that's taking place with the raging dark sides of these technologies. They're fundamentally neutral. The technology is not the issue. It's like pain. Yeah. The relationship is the issue. And that to me is where the Kali Yuga really comes in. And so until we know that we're so addicted, we're so lost in the dark, by definition, that's the pathology. So first of all, bringing it into the light of consciousness, working with the impulsivity of addiction, working with all these tendencies to be distracted, that's the first start. And so co-immersion with the distraction, the good sign is what? The mindfulness revolution. So interesting from the 50,000 foot view. Co-immersion with that is a possible solution. So it's not now hopeless. It's just a matter of will people wake up in time, right? That's the big question.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to go to break now. When we come back, we'll do those 4 steps. You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is author, speaker, humanitarian, and host of the Edge of Mind podcast, Andrew Holocek. We'll be back with more from Andrew after this break.
Om Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of Om Times' flagship radio show, What is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS. just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Andrew Holocek, are you with us? I think Andrew has temporarily left the room, but I'm sure he'll be back at any second. Andrew? Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Andrew's other books while we're waiting for him. He's written so many great books on meditation, including Dreams of Light, the profound daytime practice of lucid dreaming. And I think that daytime practice sounds a little bit like an oxymoron there, but I hope we get a chance to talk to Andrew about this when he returns. There you are.
Here I am.
Here you are. Okay. So tell us about the 4 steps of reverse meditation.
I think even more impactfully than simply telling you is let's try a little exercise together. Okay. So this way you can get quite literally a feel for them. And I do want to say at the outset that these practices are optional. You don't have to do these. But let me ask you this. Is pain optional? Is suffering optional? Is heartbreak optional? Is discord, dissonance, fill in the blank, is that optional? Doesn't seem. And so, I mean, most people in their so-called right mind, they don't want anything to do with this stuff. Old age, sickness, and death. Is that optional? So these practices are for the intrepid kind of warrior types. There's one reason a number of different traditions, spiritual traditions, are called warrior traditions, because they're for people who really want the truth. We're willing to go where the reality is. And that's another reason, being tantric in spirit, these practices can accelerate your path. That's why I say put your practice in reverse, not only to make it go forward, but to make it go forward faster. Because with these practices, again, setting the right view, nothing is forbidden. Nothing is off limits. Everything, there's no weeds in the garden of Tantra. Everything becomes grist for the mill in Tantra. And that's another reason it's part of the quick path, because everything becomes the path. Things that previously obstructed your path now actually accelerate it. That's the genius. That's why you may want to be bothered. And so with that said, I recommend the following. So go ahead and close your eyes. Put your right hand over your heart. Close your eyes. And the first thing that I'm going to invite you to do is simply just a kind of a check-in. What's it like? What are you feeling right now? Without judgment. Swami Kripalu said the highest form of spiritual practice is self-observation without judgment. So hand over your heart, creates a kind of container of loving kindness, or metta, maitri. This practice on one level, for those of you who know the term metta, loving kindness, this also doubles as a practice of metta. And people say, okay, being with my pain is a practice of metta? Are you kidding me? No, it's metta because one of the kindest things you can do is speak and live your truth. Even when you're hurting, you can speak and live from that truth. So with your right hand, you're giving yourself a check-in. You're also hugging yourself, giving yourself permission to be human, no matter what's going on right now, without judgment. Take 1 or 2 slow, mindful, deep breaths just to relax and open and ventilate just a little bit. It's a way to slow down and connect. And then as we go through these 4 stages, the invitation is to, in addition to being very kind and open to what you feel without judgment, simply notice what you feel. Just simply be curious. Notice what you feel. If you feel the mind running away in discursive commentary, that's the distraction I was talking about. Recognize that as a meditator. You know what to do. Just let it go. Come back to body and breath. And so with some, at least entry-level centering, gathering, opening, some crucible of presence, I invite you to do something that's just a tad bit uncomfortable, like dig your fingernail into your thumb, bite your lip, bite your tongue. Don't chomp on it. If you're really gonna chomp on it, you might want to look at that. The invitation here is not sadism, just simply something that's uncomfortable. So go ahead and initiate a little bit of discord. Something that's more uncomfortable than painful. Because if you start with level 10 pain, you're going to kick right into instinctive levels and you're going to steamroll right over this practice. It's only with real practice and proficiency that level 10 pain can be brought on instantly and managed, but not at first. It's too much. And so the first step is the observation phase. Just observe. Simply bear witness to what you're feeling. Again, without judgment. Just observe. Do you perhaps feel a sense of contraction, a sense of revulsion? Do you perhaps notice a cascade of almost instant commentary like, man, this is stupid. This is a waste of time. Why the heck am I doing this? I'm busy, blah, blah, blah. Observe without judgment. That's the distract you're trying to pull apart from something that doesn't feel so great. And then the next step is to simply now, instead of just observing it, one limitation of observing it, and by the way, with the 4 stages of the reverse meditation, you can stop at any stage. Whatever stage works for you, speaks for you, resonates with you. For some people, stage 1 is enough. That will radically also change your relationship. But if you want to make your pain spiritual, truly non-dual, there are 3 more steps to go. Second step is to be with the pain, because one near enemy of observing it is a subtle spiritual bypass. This can actually become a subtle form of distraction. Okay, I'm just going to step away so far, witness it. It's called witness awareness. I'm going to witness this thing so far away. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. If that works for you, fantastic. that the discord will not become spiritual if it's still dual. Second step is an invitation now. This is where the reverse starts. Be with it. Be alongside it. Hold its hand. Alter your relationship. Pull this U-turn from the tendency to get out, get in. And if at any point you want to take a break, and we can do that right now, just release everything, release the discord just for 30 seconds, especially at first. This is what's so beautiful about the practice of it. You can take this at any level, any pace that works for you. Because if you're too tight, heck, man, you're not going to do this. Instinct is too powerful. And it's also very interesting when you release. How does that feel? Again, without judgment. Ah, boy, that feels better. And then again, little discord, bite your lip, fingernail into the thumb, something uncomfortable, not really painful yet, like level 1. Be with it, just be alongside it. Be here now. Very interesting thing to say, be here now, when it's lovely and beautiful and flowers are growing and your belly's full. It's easy to be here now. That's the last thing you want to be is in the present moment when you're hurting. That's not spiritual. That's escapist. That's feel good. We're not interested in feel good spirituality. Reality, I should say spirituality, the deepest levels is not about feeling good, unless you're talking about basic goodness. It's about getting real. And getting real means including the harsh realities of birth, old age, sickness, death, and pain. Where's your spirituality then? And so the third step is examine it. Just now you're curious. Bring a little bit of analytic meditation called Vipassana. And examine the nature of this thing that is an inevitable lifetime companion. I love this part. You can bring a little bit of conceptuality in terms of investigation in and ask yourself some questions. What is this thing called pain? Really? Has anybody ever really looked? What is it made of? Open-ended questions. What is this thing called pain? And what this does is this invites a deeper interiority, a deeper somatic investigation. It's not just cerebral, intellectual. It's a somatic investigation from within. What is this thing called pain? Look, find out for yourself. And what we're doing with these steps all together, right? Reversing our relationship from contraction to openness, radical acceptance, the ability to say yes to whatever arises. And that radical openness allows us to be with that which we would normally flee from, that gesture which creates complex suffering from simple pain. So we're deconstructing suffering back into pain. And now we can even start to deconstruct pain itself. By being with it and examining it like a good scientist, first-person scientist. What is this thing? Find out for yourself. And again, release it just for a second, let it all go so it doesn't become too annoying. And then perhaps ask yourself, do you have a preference for one state over the other? The openness or the contraction? Well, the great meditation masters don't. It says in the famous Sadhana of Mahamudra, pleasure and pain are ornaments which it is pleasant to wear. Milarepa, the great Tibetan sage, when pain and pleasure are not two different things, this is as meditation as it can be. This is a great equanimity, the great equanimous relationship to whatever rises. This is why Krishnamurti, at the end of his very long life, when asked, what is the secret to your unflappable contentment and ease? He said in the most beautiful, disarming way, I don't mind what happens. Wow. And so the last step, and again, we're going through this rather quickly, but I think you can get a feel for it. Reinitiate some discord. You can cascade with some familiarity. You can cascade through these steps very quickly. Observe it, be with it, examine it. And the last and most profound step, especially for meditators, is unite with it. Now, this is a total complete reversal. Yoke with it. Now, this is different from step 2, being with it, because with step 2, you're simply being alongside of it. You're establishing a relationship to it, like walking hand in hand with it. With step 4, you're being the pain. You're going to turn directly into it 100% and dissolve, surrender into the pain. And this is what I did when I was in level 10, screeching pain, even in the ER this weekend. If you have red kidney stones, you know they hurt. I went directly into the pain, and at first, contracting away, you bet. At first, contract, wow, contract, absolutely. But I stayed with it. I opened. Because I've done this for so long, I dissolved into the pain, and here's the kicker. And again, don't take my word for it. Test it. See if it's true. By becoming one with your pain, there's no one to hurt. There's only this raw, intense sensory awareness to which we append the label pain. So this is how you deconstruct even pain into raw, intense sensory awareness, deconstructed from even the label pain. It's de-reified. You've taken it apart. You've deconstructed it. And so the 4 stages are an acronym. Observe it, O. Be with it, B. Examine it, E. Yoke with it, unite. Obey. Obey a new order of relationship to unwanted experience. And I'll leave you with this final unbelievable teaching from the Mahasiddha Trungpa Rinpoche, one of his greatest teachings in my estimation. The absolute experience of duality is the experience of non-duality. Let me say that again. The absolute experience of pain, that's the duality, I'm experiencing the pain. The referencing back to the sense of self creates not only the feeler, but also the pain itself. This is the real deep end of the pool, just to show you how far this goes. By deconstructing the pain, you're deconstructing the person who feels it. This is where it becomes non-dual and therefore spiritual. And this is where it becomes bliss. because there's no longer you, an experiencer, experiencing pain. The sensation is experiencing itself. This is very profound. This is the deepest end of the pool. This is how far this practice can take you. So the issue, therefore, is not the pain or any unwanted experience. The issue is an incomplete, inappropriate relationship to it, driven by various levels of distraction, not wanting to be with it. Go into it 100%. And again, don't take my word for it. Check it out. Kick the tires. Look under the hood. See if this speaks to you. So many stories in the literature. I could recite countless instances from Krishnamurti, from all the sages, from the Zen tradition, so many masters experiencing states of true enlightenment under extreme pain. Because in those instances, it becomes non-dual. Let it all go. Rest your hand on your side. Take a breath or two. And there you have it. So, over the course of 200 pages in my book, we raced right all the way to the deep end of the pool. And again, I invite you to work with it. More importantly, play with it. See how it feels for you. Stop at any of the stages. Each one is designed to radically change your relationship to these unwanted experiences. But when you get to that fourth stage of uniting and yoking, completely dissolving into the pain, literally surrendering to it, the ultimate radical acceptance, the ultimate yes. That's when the pain becomes spiritual. That's when you feel bliss. Now, this is not conventional bliss. This is the great bliss. The great bliss devoid of experience and experiencer, truly a non-dual experience. And again, read the literature. Hundreds, if not thousands of accounts of spiritual meditation masters. They're the ones that get the print. We have the same mind and heart that they do. We can do what they do. We can open to that extent. We can change our relationship by reversing, going into it. And we haven't even touched, we could do this briefly, or you can extend it on your own. To me, because I don't have as much physical pain like I did this weekend, emotional upset, duress, emotional break, heartbreak. For me, this has been an amazing thing. I mean, I lose my lover, I lose my wife, or whatever. With these practices, I do the same thing. I go directly into it. I go through the 4 stages. And in this alchemical way, it's like I purify, it purifies. I drop from my head into my body, waking down. My body knows what to do with this stuff. I purify it. I relate to it in a radically new way. And this, to me, and I write about this in this book, one of the most impactful ongoing examples of this is working with emotional duress, heartbreak, pain, disappointment, discouragement, taking any unwanted experience. And then this is a one-size-fits-all practice. Modern modifications, slight by slight, but you will find that you can apply these same 4 fundamental principles to any untoward experience.
Well, it seems I got lost then. I don't know if it was me that disappeared into nirvana or whether it was the internet cutting me off. But I know you've done a fabulous job of finishing off the show for me, Andrew. And unfortunately, all the hundreds of questions that I had listed for you, we will not get to answer this time. Next time, yeah. Just before we go, very, very quickly, tell us about the events that you've got coming up, because you've got some fascinating stuff going on.
Yeah, boy, it's a busy time right now for me, right? So, all kinds of things. I'm at the University of Virginia doing a thing with some scientists and academics. I roll out in that community. I'm doing a program at Esalen. 3 events in Europe and Spain. So all the stuff is on my website, in Spain and France. And then really the most important thing that I want to say is we're launching in July a program we've been working on for 10 years. Really exhaustive, very rigorous 3-month training program on preparation for death, preparation for the end of life. of which the reverse meditations are really, really key, because what's more unwanted than death?
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest thing, is a very deep, rigorous exploration of how to manage for yourself and for others this most challenging situation. How can we transform that obstacle into quite literally a once in a lifetime opportunity?
And that was something I really wanted to go deeper into. But it is an important subject, and I think it's something you're going to have to come back
Oh,
and
I love
talk
it.
to us about that another time.
I love it. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to go just a little bit more deeply and slowly with these reverse meditations, because otherwise, without some backing and without some exploration of it, it's like, this guy's nuts. There's no way I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So I appreciate this.
Well, it is an absolutely fascinating book, and one that you really need to read. Thank you, Andrew, so much for joining us today.
My delight. I so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Andrew's books, Dreams of Light, The Profound Daytime Practice of Lucid Dreaming, and Reverse Meditation, published by Sounds True. And Reverse Meditation will hit the bookstores in July, but it's available for pre-order now on Amazon. You can learn more about Andrew's work at andrewholocek.com, and you can listen to his podcasts at edgeofmindpodcast.com. That's it for this week. I'll be back at same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. Until then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Sandie. It's been a delight, really. Great questions. Such an opportunity.